Hello and welcome back to What's Your History, the podcast that covers all areas of history and archaeology, no matter how big or how small, how well known or how niche. Today's guest was Sarah Fede. She has an MA in Museums and Artifact Studies, and today's topic was about a portrait that's hanging up in the York Art Gallery, which is the portrait of Mary Denton. This was a very interesting episode as I don't know much about art history at all, so this was very interesting. Sarah's breakdown of this painting and what her interpretation is of it. I hope you enjoy. Today I'm with my friend Sarah and we are going to be talking about
a portrait of Mary Denton attributed to George Gower.
Ooh. So, why do you want to talk about this painting today?
So, this is my favorite piece on display at York Art Gallery. I was just attracted to it initially from an aesthetic point of view, but also from a historical point of view. I really like art history. I'm not really a big modern art person because, I don't know, I just don't understand it. I'm trying to appreciate it more, but I'm just not that much of an art, modern art person.
No, I can relate to that. I don't particularly like art, modern art.
Yeah, I feel like historical art is a way that we can see the past because they didn't have photography or anything like that. So it's like a depiction, like what can we see? So I'll pull up the picture here.
So the painting is of a young woman called Mary Denton. In the painting, she's said to have been 14 years old when this painting was done.
15.
Oh, 15, sorry. And it's meant to be a wedding picture because apparently if you look very closely at her left hand, she does have a wedding band on it. Her clothes are very elaborate, very close to that of Elizabeth I. Is this why you wanted to talk about it?
Yeah, so, and what I'm going to talk about essentially is who she was, her dress, my interpretation of the piece, and then I want to talk a little bit about who George Gower was, and just why he's so interesting.
That's fair. It's a very beautiful painting.
Yeah, it's very, visually striking. So I'd like to start off with what I'd like to call the gravestone information, or the very basic facts of this painting. So it was painted in 1573 when she was 15 years old. And we know this because of the Latin inscription in the upper right-hand corner, which says, Aetatis sui 15. I'm saying 15 because I don't know how to say numbers in Latin, despite me taking it for 7 years. Anno Domini 1573. So that translates to in her 15th year, in the year of our Lord, 1573.
Oh, okay.
So it's attributed to George Gower. However, we don't know for sure that this is the correct attribution because there appears to be no signature anywhere on this painting. And today, attribution is difficult, and art historians and curators base attribution on the style of painting, the sitter, and related documentation such as receipts or bills of payment.
Yeah, I can understand that because the painting itself, if you will see in this painting, which I will put in the description down below, so hopefully you should be able to see it, but she does look very strikingly like Elizabeth I and how she was painted, especially in her younger years.
Yeah, and what's interesting, because a lot of people say that as well, they think of, I will talk about Elizabeth I later in my talk, but it was really common for young ladies to want to replicate Elizabeth I's, her visual features, because she was the ideal beauty at the time, or the standard of beauty at the time.
Ah, so this might not be the real representation of this young lady.
Oh, maybe not. Okay, so it's highly likely that this painting was cut down from its original size, which would have likely removed the artist's signature. Because the medium is oil on oak paneling. It's not a canvas, it's oak. And then it was purchased by York Art Gallery with the assistance of the V&A Museum Purchase Grant Fund in 1967, and it stayed there ever since. And the sitter is, of course, Mary Denton. Now, who was Mary Denton, and why was she important enough to have a painting commissioned for her? So, Mary Denton's maiden name was Mary Martin, and she was born in 1558. She was the daughter and co-heiress of Sir Roger Martin, who was a mercer, and he became the Lord Mayor of London in 1568 through the marriage of his second wife, Elizabeth Castellan. So Mary married Alexander Denton of Hillsden in Buckinghamshire in 1573. Alexander Denton was a landowner, and he was, did I say he was a member of the Buckinghamshire gentry? And this was apparently Denton's second marriage, his second marriage. The first was to a woman by the name of Anne Wilson, who unfortunately died at the age of 18. But that's the way things go back in the 16th century. So Mary and Alexander had one child together. His name was Thomas, and he became a politician who sat in the House of Commons between 1604 and 1629. And so I feel like that's the very basic, like, skeletal facts of her life.
Yeah.
But it's given all of that information, it's safe to say that Mary and Alexander were affluent, wealthy members of English nobility. And one of the results of this affluence being the commissioning of this portrait of Mary here today. So like you said originally, it's said that this painting was painted or commissioned to celebrate her recent betrothal to Alexander. And the painting gives us three clues for that. One is the fact the fact that it's painted in 1573, the same year as their marriage. Mm-hmm. Second is the fact that there's an obvious wedding band on her left ring finger. And third is the lozenge-shaped coat of arms in the upper right-hand corner there. Now, I'm not an expert on heraldry, and I don't know about symbolism, but what I can tell you is that the lozenge shape alone lets us know that the woman is an unmarried woman from an important family or a family of high social standing. And women during this time would often take on the coat of arms of her father if she was unmarried, or her husband if she was married. Okay. But what's interesting about Mary's is the fact that it's a triple impalement. So she takes on the coat of arms of three people. In the center is her father's, mm-hmm. Roger Martin.
Yeah, and that looks to be red with some little
signets,
white...
I think.
Signets, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. The right is her betrothed, Alexander. On the left is her mother, Elizabeth Castellan. And the reason that I think that is because probably the family's wealth came from her mother's side, given the fact that her father was elevated to the status of Lord Mayor of London upon their marriage.
Really?
Mm.
Oh, okay.
Mm.
So do you know anything about the mother's background?
No, I don't, unfortunately. Honestly, I don't really care.
Fair enough, that's fair.
Yeah, so it's unusual impalement, but nevertheless, it signifies that she's a betrothed woman. So Mary died, obviously. She's not still alive, and her husband outlived her by 2 years. But together they were buried in Hillsden Church, and there survives a memorial to the two of them, which is very nice.
Oh, so he didn't marry again after she passed away?
He didn't marry again. Yeah. So
what was their relationship like? Was it a relationship of love, maybe?
I think that it's just a purely transactional marriage. There was nothing that indicated to me that they hated each other or that they were fond of each other. So, yeah, I don't really know. But as I have done this talk, some people have said that she appears to be a bit scared. So I think that's an interesting observation, yeah.
I'd say I'm not getting scared.
I don't either, yeah.
I'm getting somebody who's very sure of herself and very sure of her position. Staring at the artist straight out. Because I know at certain periods of history as well, depending on paintings, all depending on how they looked, and if they're looking straight at the artist, that could mean something personal or something like that as well. I'm not an art historian, like a little wink. I'm not an art historian myself, so I can't really comment, but this is just from the odd little thing that I've read. So what has she got in her overhand? She seems to be holding something.
I will get into this. So I want to talk about the intricacies of her dress.
That's fair.
Because I think it's quite fascinating that Gower was able to capture them in this painting using the mediums he did. So in this portrait, we see Mary at 3/4 length, and she wears her curly chestnut hair and this elaborate jeweled hairband. And her outfit consists of this highly starched lace ruff collar, which, if you think about Elizabethan or Tudor fashion, we think of ruff collars.
Yeah.
It's just synonymous with that time period. And she's also got the matching wrist pieces as well. She wears this black damask overgown, which is decorated with glittering spangles, as you can see. It curves to, you can't really see it in this painting, but if you see it in person, it curves to create the illusion of a waist right here, and appears that the black damask appears to be secured to the bodice underneath.
Yeah. Okay, that's nice.
Yeah.
What about the red bit though?
The red bit is, so I think that he portrays it really well with these shiny bits. It's like this dull red velvet, the bodice and a matching skirt. And the bodice is decorated with these, so she's got embroidery. She's got these beautiful braided gold chains that go around. And she's also got, you can't really see it in this picture, it's not very good. But it appears to be encrusted with precious jewels such as rubies, diamonds,
I can see
and pearls.
the jewels there. And she's also got like a necklace on as well.
Yeah, she's wearing this, what I think is a lace partlet, or like a mesh partlet, which would have given her dress a bit more modesty, given the fact that her bodice is cut a bit low. Excuse me. But it is cut out in this triangle shape, which reveals a gold necklace pendant, which I think has jet in it with the center of a little ruby.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So her left hand, as you can see, is lifting up just enough material to reveal the white underskirt underneath. And then in her right hand is a pendant of diamonds and rubies in an enamel setting, which is attached by a chain to her bodice.
Is it maybe a religious thing?
So I still need to do more research on the thing, because people have come up to me and said that it's for religious purposes. Some people have suggested, maybe it's a reliquary, maybe it's the thing that the priests hold at church services with incense coming out of it. But I think that it does have a religious purpose, but nevertheless it has some meaning to her, and perhaps maybe it's a precious family heirloom or something. But yeah, I think that it does have religious importance. I just need to do more research on it.
That's perfectly fine. The one thing I've noticed when I've seen the actual painting and this picture here as well, she just looks really knackered in it.
Yeah, a lot of people say she doesn't look 15. She looks very, I guess, a bit older as well. Yeah, maybe from standing so long for the portrait.
Isn't it possible that it was probably painted later on, but it was like a late painting to represent the wedding or something like that? So maybe she got married at 15, but this was painted maybe years later. Maybe.
Yeah, that's a good point. So as I kind of rambled about her dress, you can obviously tell that there's this proliferation of just applied decoration in her clothing. From the embroidery, the lace, she's got these cute little bows on the bodice as well. Spangles. If anything, it's an example of Elizabethan's fashion's increased preoccupation with pattern, design, decoration, and the avoidance of plain surfaces in general. Like, minimalism was not a thing. the reason why I put so much attention to Mary's dress is because I feel like it's the highlight of her portrait, not necessarily herself alone. I don't feel like her personality shines through in this, through Gower's portrayal of her, mainly because portraits during this time period were intended to be a record of the sitter's wealth and status, not necessarily a sympathetic representation of their personality. Also, fashion in this time period, it would have like completely obscured the natural female form. So, like I said, like the everything was starched and it was like tight, or everything was pulled in. Yeah. And if anything, I believe that Gower portrays Mary as a pale, self-restrained creature with, like, she's got a bit of rouge in her cheeks and maybe some kohl to highlight her green eyes. And you can see it more in person. But Mary's waist is very small in comparison to her shoulders. Like, she's got these very dramatic, like, collared shoulders. And whether that's an artistic technique or the result of a restrictive dress she's wearing, that's up for discussion. So moving on to my interpretation of the piece. And this is the part of the talk where it kind of is inspired by you, actually.
Oh, okay.
So when I told people that I was going to be doing a talk on this painting, they were like, why? Like, why do you care? It's 500-year-old painting. She died 500 years ago. How can it be related to us in the modern day? And when I first started working, you told me to like always find, like the modern day comparison so people actually understand it. So this is my modern day interpretation. I would argue that Elizabethan portraiture is very similar to the modern day world of social media profiles. And these two concepts may seem worlds apart, separated by centuries of technological and cultural evolution. But upon closer examination, you can kind of see similarities in the way that individuals choose to represent themselves to the world. So, in the Elizabethan era, portraiture, like Mary Denton's portrait here, is a powerful tool of self-presentation. And just as modern individuals carefully curate their social media profiles, Elizabethan sitters would meticulously curate their appearance. So they selected their attire, their accessories, their poses for their portraits, and both forms of self-expression served as a means to project their desired image to society. And much like the well-practiced art of cropping and applying filters to photos today, Elizabethan artists would often employ artistic techniques to enhance their subject's appearance. So they would play with lighting, shadow, flattering angles. Like, you can see she's not fully like head on. She's kind of turned like, you would say, like 30 to 45 degrees. So they would do this in a way to highlight the sitter's best features, which is similar to today's use of Photoshop and filters to achieve like a flawless look. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, no, it's like there is iconic paintings of Elizabeth I, but even she had it catered to how she wanted to always be seen. She always wanted to be seen as the virgin, youthful queen, even when she was getting old and her skin was going white because of all the lead and stuff. And she's getting really pearly, but no, she's youthful. She can't. So, yeah, no.
She was the image of beauty.
Yeah.
So, moving on, just like Instagram captions, Facebook statuses, they offer insights into like our personal narratives. And the symbolism and objects included in Elizabethan portraits would carry hidden messages. So like miniatures of loved one, books, or like specific clothing items, or maybe like the pendant that she's wearing. It would convey a sitter's like their hobbies, their allegiances, or what mattered most to them in their lives. And today, individuals may use like hashtags, emojis, that kind of thing to share their stories and their affiliations, who they like, what they're interested in. And I feel like the act of sharing one's portrait in the Elizabethan era was a very like public and intentional gesture, like, please look at me. And it's very similar to like what we do nowadays, where it's like we post a profile picture, tweet a tweet, update your Facebook status, and it allows people to shape their identity, their reputation, garnering like them admiration, respect, or courtship. So building off this idea, I'd like to insert, I think it's amusing, anecdote about how portraiture is linked with modern day social media profiles. And this happened before Mary Denton's time, but it's in the same Tudor time period. So in 1540, the King of England, Henry VIII, he sought a political alliance through marriage after the death of his third wife, Jane Seymour, and he arranged to marry Anne of Cleves, who was a German princess, based on a portrait of her. And the portrait of Anne would go on to play a pivotal role in their marriage. And it was painted by this renowned German artist, Hans Holbein the Younger. So Holbein was commissioned by Henry to create a portrait of Anne in order to help appraise her as a wife. So he required the painting to be as accurate as possible, which could possibly suggest she's very front-facing and direct. So you can see in the portrait, she's got these like heavy-lidded eyes, she's got like pointed chin, she's got high forehead. These were all characteristics of female Tudor beauty. And unfortunately, like, Anne made the journey from Flanders to England. Unfortunately, the portrait did not accurately represent Anne's appearance.
Or at least according to Henry.
According to Henry, leading to his disappointment when he met her in person. So he went on to regard her, infamously, regard her as a fat Flanders mare.
Say catfishing back in the Tudor times.
Yeah, and despite marrying her, he like went on to marry her after seeing her in person. He quickly sought an annulment to the marriage, claiming that he couldn't consummate it due to her unattractiveness. So,
what a guy!
What a guy!
You know, if you see this guy on Tinder, you definitely want to swipe
He's like
right
the
on
Tinder
that.
swindler. Okay, so connecting that to like the modern day. So just like as the portrait of Anne of Cleves might not have, or it may have presented her in a more flattering or idealized light, online dating profiles allow people to present themselves in the best way possible, where they can choose their best photos, craft a compelling bio, and highlight just like the best features in general.
Well, yeah, you don't want to scare people away, you know.
Like, I'm the crypt keeper.
Could you just imagine that? If you were being honest on a dating site and go, by the way, I don't like people, I need to be fed, I need my belly rubbed, because I'm basically a cat. I will cry at certain moments throughout the day.
Certain moments.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to be getting many guys if you do that.
No. So, yeah, obviously it can create high expectations before meeting in person, which is probably what happened between Henry VIII and Anne of Cleves. And you can make the argument that Anne of Cleves catfished Henry VIII with the help of Hans Holbein. Mm. So, yeah. To finish, I'd like to discuss George Gower, to whom this painting was originally attributed.
But how do we know it was attributed, that it was his work, seeing as there's no signature?
Well, I'm just going to say it's attributed. Yeah. There's not much known about George Gower, except for the fact that he was active as a painter between the years of 1573, he painted this and one other portrait during this year, and then his death in 1596. Despite other artists being very active and popular in the court, such as Nicholas Hilliard, Gower was appointed sergeant painter to Queen Elizabeth I in 1581, which was a very honorable and lucrative position for him. And this meant that he was the official court painter. He with the monarch, it allowed him to paint most of England's aristocracy. He was responsible for painted decoration on coaches and in the royal residence. And most importantly, he inspected portraits of the Queen by other artists prior to their official release to the public. So Gower was most famous for this painting of Elizabeth I, the Plimpton Sea portrait, which is now at the Folger Shakespeare Library. And this was painted in 1579. So like many of the portraits of Elizabeth, the Sieve portrait constitutes this growing tradition of portraits during this time period that were highly steeped in classical mythology. And this time period of her reign, the years between 1558 and 1603, it's synonymous with the English Renaissance, the golden age of English history. And you could say that it's a stark contrast to her father, Henry VIII, whose reign is largely characterized by religious upheaval, such as the break with Rome, dissolution of the monasteries. Unlike her father, I believe the arts blossomed under Elizabeth I. And when we think of Elizabeth I, we largely think of Shakespeare. But she also took a keen interest to portraits, particularly portraits of herself.
Well,
So she guided artists such as Gower in the creation of stylized images of this immense wealth, elegance, and power. And Elizabeth's portraits were kind of like national propaganda. The portraits that circulated of her throughout England were not only a reminder of her physical features to the general public, but they were of her as an image, like an icon full of glory, calculated to evoke in the eyes of the beholder the principles for which she and her government stood for. You can imagine just how important Gower's job was in manipulating the image of the Queen as an object of devotion and veneration. And like I said previously, like her portraits were highly classicalized and steeped in mythical iconography, and Gower's Sieve portrait is no exception to that. As you can see, she's pictured carrying a sieve or a vessel, which signifies the Roman Vestal version Tucia. I believe that's how I pronounce it, or Tucia. And she was famous for carrying water in a sieve to prove her chastity. And the symbolism is more than appropriate for a monarch who claimed herself to be the Virgin Queen. So the globe at the upper left represents England's role in the age of exploration. And then there's an Italian motto above it. I will try to say it. Tutto vedo and e molto manca, which means I see everything and much is lacking, signifying Elizabeth's leadership and in the imperial expansion. And then she's got a crest, and below the crest is a line from the Italian poet Petrarch, and it can be translated to weary rest and rest with woe and pain. And the passage describes the life of someone dedicated to the pursuit of love.
Well, that kind of makes sense in all fairness, because she was all about the courtly love.
Yeah.
She liked to play the game, but she never wanted to be caught.
Yeah. Yeah, like Darnley. So that's the end of my talk. I feel like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, even though, this may just be another portrait of, England's aristocracy, the portrait of Mary Denton kind of offers us a captivating glimpse into the intricacies of Elizabethan portraiture, fashion, and its societal norms. Mary, who was born into English nobility, becomes not just a subject of a painting, but a representative of the cultural and social ideals of her era. And I hope that my focus on Mary's attire and how she presents herself serves as a bridge to understanding the parallels between the deliberate presentation of oneself in the 16th century and then the carefully curated profiles on modern-day social media platforms. And I was writing this talk and kind of deciding what way I wanted to go with it. I found myself kind of not just looking at or observing a historical artifact, but engaging in this reflection of an era that's marked by political, cultural, and artistic dynamism. And through the lens of Mary Denton, we can connect the dots between past and present, and we can recognize this enduring human spirit to always present ourselves in the best possible light. And the portrait becomes a window into the complexities of identity, societal norms, and the art of self-presentation, which transcends the boundaries of time and technology. So thanks for letting me ramble about a portrait, for a 500-year-old portrait.
That's perfectly fine. I've got some questions about said portrait.
Oh.
Like, is she a Yorkshire lass? Do we know?
I don't think so.
Because I'm just wondering, why is it that the York Art Gallery, that is in North Yorkshire, why have they got this painting of this young lady?
Yeah, something that I always like about just museums in general is provenance, and I've yet to look in the archives to figure out what the provenance was before 1967 when the painting was added to the collection. So I don't know. I really don't know. Oh, wait, I do know actually. I think Gower was, or his father was from Yorkshire. So maybe that's why. But other than that, I don't know.
So the young lady is probably a Londoner and it's the artist who's a Yorkshire lad. Right, fair. Okay, fair. To an extent. I would have liked it if she was from Yorkshire.
Yeah, that would have been more fitting.
Yeah, because it would have proved that it doesn't matter whereabouts you're from. You could be part of the gentry, it's fine.
Yeah. Eddie he was born in York, so it's fitting that they're there.
Yeah. So what is it that drew you to this painting in the first place? Because I know you've done all this research. It is a wonderful painting. If you ever get a chance to see it in person, it is a lovely painting. But what drew you to it? What made you go, you know what, I want to look into this?
Well, it's definitely from the time period that I'm most interested in. I really like the Wars of the Roses up into the Tudor period. So that's kind of, my thing. But also, I never want to do a talk on like a man. I feel like it's overdone. I like the expression of femininity. That's what I think drew me in first. Yeah. I like, to talk about the fashion and the ways that, women may have like presented themselves back in the day.
Yeah, because in all fairness, as much as a lot of people might think fashion is all fluffy nonsense, for a very long time it was the only way we were able to truly express ourselves was through the clothing we wore or how we wore it or that sort of thing.
Yeah. I just think that, the expression of femininity is what really drew me to it. Yeah, because the art gallery has a really strong collection of modern art pieces, but and not saying that's a bad thing, but yeah, I truly like more of the older historical stuff. Yeah.
Are you the kind of person who would prefer to go to the National Portrait Gallery and see the paintings of like Elizabeth and Richard and stuff? Yeah. That's fair.
I also like the symbolism too. Like it's kind of fun to, like, as a modern viewer, considering that we're not that well versed in the symbolism, it's kind of fun to like decode what everything means, So that's what I was excited to do, like when I embarked on my research, not only of Mary Denton's, but also of portraits of Elizabeth I. Yeah.
Are you going to be doing any more research into this sort of thing, do you think?
Yeah, I've bought a couple of books because, in all fairness, the first time I did this talk, a woman came up to me and she was like, I'm doing my PhD in art history down in London, and the pendant that she's holding, and this exchange happened really fast. So unfortunately, I didn't write down what she said. But she was like, the pendant that she's holding is this type of thing. And she said like a term that I should have gotten her to write it down or something. But like, I was just so flustered from giving the talk for the first time that I just was like, oh my God, thank you for coming to my talk, that kind of thing. But yeah, she said this, and then I turned to my colleague and I was like, what did she say? So we tried to look it up, and I bought a few books that are specifically dedicated to like Elizabethan era pendants, and so hopefully that will give me a better insight onto what it is. But she did say that it has religious significance to it, so whatever that means.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. Well, thank you for this. It's been
Thank you.
very interesting.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
No, it's all right. I really appreciate you having the time, because I've taken you off on your day off to come and do this talk. But it's been very, very interesting, and because I've always, whenever I see this painting, I do get drawn to it. That and a few others that are in the art gallery as well. But this one I really do get drawn to, more from like the historical point of view.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that someone's done the work for me in a way. So yeah, thank you for this. It's been very interesting.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you.